Hi, everyone, we're now joined by Dynamo 2 head coach Kenny Bundy. I'll go ahead and kick things off, and then we'll take any questions. Please use the raise my hand option to ask Kenny a question. Kenny, preparing for Sunday's game here against LA Galaxy 2, how's the team navigated preparation for that?
It's another game where if you look at where they are in the standings, you get a false sense of who they are and how good they are. So it's really important that we come in focused and improving from the last performance. But the energy in the group is fantastic. I think this last 5 games, the guys understand how important they are, and I think we're in a good spell and in good form. So the key will be getting the early goal. Can we put multiple goals away? And then can we make them suffer throughout 90 minutes?
Thank you for that. We'll go to Dustin. Dustin, go ahead.
Hey, Kenny.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, you talked a little bit about it, but last week you guys were up 3-1, ended up losing. How do you, as a coach, how do you rebound off of that?
It depends on how you look at games like that. And I think the mentality of the staff is we're very specific about how we manage losses, right? And, I think when you go 6 games unbeaten, it's not a bad thing that you get pushed a little bit or that things don't play out in your favor. And yeah, I think we're up 3-1, and we as a staff probably could have made it clearer at halftime, specifically what was going to win the game. And we made the points, but I think they were maybe masked by other tactical points where that game away from home, up 3-1, maybe the points needed to be a bit more mental. And we made those points, but they were masked by some tactical ideas. So I did a lot of reflection, and I told the guys, I said, that's on me. I said, I think we were right in what we gave you, and we just gave it in maybe a less specific way. Being 3-1 up, winning the first 15 minutes of the second half, not necessarily worried about getting the next goal, but making sure that if we do get an opportunity, we're ready for it. I think those were clear points that I could have emphasized a little bit better. That being said, we look at games like that, and those are learning moments. You can look and say, oh, frustrated. And I think, at the end of the game, I was probably more animated than I have been all season and even into last season, because I wanted them to understand how important the details are, especially at this time. So we look at it as a learning moment. And when we reflect on the game, we reflect on the things that we can improve. And when you do that right after a loss like that, when you have the group of guys we have, I think it hits home that in these last 5 games, a lot of what's going to happen is going to come down to moments that you might not at the time realize are the most important moments of the game. And I'll give you an example. It's a foul at the top of the box. It's a tracking the runner when the set piece is saved. It's a throw-in that we have in our defensive third that doesn't just miss a couple lines and we reorganize. It actually comes back right at us. Those are the moments that I think get masked sometimes when you're up 3-1. So it's not a bad thing that we have to go through a little adversity right now.
And just last one for me. Obviously you guys made the playoffs last year. You have a number of those players back. How important is that with these veterans that you have on the team as you guys go through another kind of push to the playoffs here?
Yeah, I mean, I said this to the guys today. We talk about every game now as a playoff game. Yeah, but the second game and the third game and the fourth game and the fifth game of the season are playoff games, because it always comes down to, especially in our league where you can get 2 points for a draw, it always comes down to these fine margins. It just doesn't make sense to say that at the 5th game of the season. But all of these games are important. And for us, it's less about the leadership of the group, making the younger players or the new players understand what it takes, because the majority of these guys have made playoffs in wherever they've come from. The key for us is that, we want to play to the level and the expectation that we've set for ourselves. So that also is managing the chaos of teams that are pushing to make the playoffs. Everybody's going to act different in the last 5 games. Why is there a decision day? There's a decision day because they want to amp up pressure and they want to make it this big. Okay, it's going to be the last thing. Every league does it, and it's great because it really shows the teams that can stay focused and organized on what they can control, and the teams that maybe let the mentality or the moment control how they play. So I think as a collective group, it's just about refocusing on what we can control on Sunday, and what we can control is our chance creation, how we protect the goal, and then honestly, we can control making people suffer when they come to Houston. And that is really, really important. And the way you make people suffer is you make them feel like they don't have a hope. And that comes with early goals. That comes with multiple goals. That comes with key defensive actions in important times of the game. That's a very broad statement I'm giving you, but understand that's where we start as a staff, and we whittle down to the specific details.
Thanks, Kenny.
Thank you.
Anything else for Kenny before we wrap up here? Rudy, go ahead.
Hey, Coach. I just have a question, I guess, regarding, something we don't necessarily hear often, and that's, your roster's always changing. You lose guys because of college or, anything else that would be in there. But how does that make your job a little harder, coming up with a good way to set up your team every week?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rudy. I mean, honestly, we could talk about this. This is a podcast conversation, to be honest with you. This is an hour-long conversation where the questions just keep coming and they get deeper and deeper. To be honest, when we started this project almost 2 years ago, the key mission statement that we were going to have as a staff is we were going to be flexible. And what that meant was we are going to do our best for these guys, no matter what the situation is put in front of us. And that entails making sure that a guy that maybe at the last second needs minutes, a guy that hasn't played with us needs to step in, a young player deserves the opportunity to play. All of those things, it's about us as a staff getting those players as prepared as possible. And I have to give credit to the staff, because when you look at what Dan and what Ryan, Brandy, Jen, Rich, everybody's doing, even Rico, our admin, as far as getting information, Mike, our video analyst, making sure that these players, and I'll use it more specifically to, a guy that's maybe on the roster, maybe not on the roster for the first team, and then they drop down, and maybe they haven't been with us all week. It's how do we get them the information so that it doesn't overload them, but also gives them the freedom to be their self. Now, the flip side to that too is guys having a relationship with other players on the field. And I'm not talking about here in the facility, because the first and second team couldn't be any closer when it comes to seeing each other, knowing each other in the facility. It's more or less when they're playing. So trying to get them to understand what each other's going to do. And sometimes that takes 45 minutes. You guys have seen it this year. We've had games where, we've been outstanding. The next game, maybe there's been 4 or 5 changes, and it's taken 45, 50 minutes for the guys to get to know each other. It's a puzzle. Honestly, it's a puzzle. And it's every time I do a puzzle, I get to maybe 10 pieces left, and there's a freaking piece missing. And our job as a staff is to make sure that we don't lose any pieces, and then we put those pieces in the right place so that as a player, they can step on the field and they can be free to be themselves. And I think that's the biggest challenge for us, but it's a challenge that we embrace, and we talk to other coaches in the league, and it's a challenge everybody has. You're always trying to figure out how to get the most out of these guys with maybe not a lot of time, because we want what's best for them. So it's a great question. Like I said, it's a long answer, and there's so many different variations. I think this year we've maybe had 2 games in a row where the roster's been somewhat similar, maybe only one player different, but we've had games where it's been 5 or 6, and then the next game it's been 3 or 4 different guys. But that's our job, and we embrace it. And it's fantastic when you get to see a player that needs minutes. Look, I'm just going to say it right now. Nelson, what he's been doing with the first team, right, makes us so proud, because Nelson played a couple games with us when he needed minutes. Look at Brad Smith. What a goal he scored. I mean, come on. That if I didn't feel like I was going to get fined a lot of money, I was about to run on the field and tackling. It's one of those things where you see Brad, and Brad's coming back from an injury. He's needed minutes. He's come down. He's been a fantastic person when he's come into the second team locker room. He's on the field. He's given everything. You get these guys, Andrew Tarbell, these are the guys that it's also tough for them. But, on the flip side, we're also trying to produce young players that can come up and get to an Open Cup final, that can make the playoffs for the first team. And everything I just said is about making sure our first team wins trophies. And that to me, and that to the staff, and that to the front office is our number one goal. I don't think there'll ever be a moment where we think, okay, we've done it, we've achieved it, that's exactly what we need. But you start to see bits and pieces of that, right? And you start to see, we're going to go and play Miami for a trophy, right? We go and we beat Portland 5-0, we go tomorrow to Salt Lake. That playoff push for the first team. There's a vested interest in that for us in everything that we do. So it's a great question.
Thanks, Coach. Good luck on Sunday. And yeah, hopefully we can have you in the podcast eventually.
Yeah, write down all those questions, and you just have to keep that thing rolling.
Thanks.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap up with that one. Kenny, thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you, everybody.